Hello, personal productivity enthusiasts and community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, the productivity and technology news show. Today's show is brought to you by W3C Web Services, and I'm Ray Sidney-Smith.
And I'm Augusto Pinaud.
And we're your hosts for Anything But Idle. This is episode 23, and we're recording this on October 12th, 2020. Each week, we cover the productivity news headlines of the week. And to do that, today we have two panelists with us to cover the news. And they are Dr. Frank Buck, and Matt Plummer, who is the CEO of Zarvana. And so Dr. Buck is with us today. I'm going to bring him up. And so most people are overwhelmed by the amount of paper and digital information in their lives. Frank Buck makes organization easy so you can increase productivity, decrease stress, and enjoy life. Global Gurus ranked Frank #1 in the world in the time management category for 2019 and 2020. His career path took him from band director to principal to central office administrator, and now to productivity coach and speaker. Welcome to Anything But Idle, Frank.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Ray.
And to round us out, I have Matt Plummer, CEO of Zarvana. Matt is a former operations manager and strategy and management consultant who got tired of sacrificing his personal life to work long hours without moving up in his career as quickly as he wanted. So he began a journey to create to greater productivity and ended up cutting his hours by over 30% and managing 3 to 4 projects in the time others managed 2. This experience led him to start Zarvana, where he helps other ambitious professionals achieve the same results with workshops, coaching, and an online learning platform. And so with that, welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks so much for having me here. Excited for this topic.
Fantastic. So this week's theme, welcome to our live audience, by the way. Welcome to you all watching. And so I know it's probably last minute for those of you who did dial in, and I'm welcome to the show. And so we're going to be coming live each week, just like this, and we're going to have Augusto and I and hopefully 2 other panelists each week to do this show. And each week we're going to try and theme it with something just to start off with a conversation that I think would be useful and salient to the personal productivity audience. And so today's theme is actually mental health awareness. If you all didn't know, on Saturday 10/10 was World Mental Health Day, and we also ended this past week with Mental Illness Awareness Week. And so because of the two of those, I thought we would just have a conversation about some of the things that we see in the personal productivity and technology space around mental health and just the awareness of those kinds of things. So first and foremost, I came across this study and I just thought it was so dramatically interesting, which was that it said that 82% of people believe robots can support their mental health better than humans. And if you dig into this study a little bit more, in essence, this study was all about all of the various both negative and other impacts of mental health on the global workforce. And so it just goes to show that we don't really know as much as we should know in our own kind of microcosms about what people are thinking and how they're feeling as it relates to making their way through really the global pandemic, but just the reality of being stuck in our spaces. And so I just wanted to bring up the topic and hear from you all in terms of what has your experience been so far in hearing about people's or varieties of people's experiences with mental health in the past year.
Well, Ray, I'll jump in. My background's in education. I was a principal for many years and still have great contact with schools. And it has just thrown everybody for a loop. Teachers are doing double duty. In many cases, they're teaching students in person and also teaching students online and trying to build a plane as they're flying the plane. And stress has become a real factor in the world of education. People leaving the profession. It's just, it's something we've never faced before.
Yeah, it is interesting. You mentioned the example of stress on education. I have 2 little kids, and I have seen firsthand from these teachers the stress to translate that real world that they know really well, where they could move with no issues,
Mhm.
to now this virtual, and how these things translate from them, and the stress. On top of that, I, as a coach, been seeing so many people struggling with the working at home. Now, this is not my office. Where are my, my whiteboards? Where is the interruptions, the distractions, dealing with educating the kids at the same time they're trying to work, plus going into Zoom and everything else. So the stress and the struggle I seen is real. I'm not surprised to read so many people believe that the robots and the systems can support them better. We have not done a really good job supporting each other before all this pandemic. And there was so many other things that you could do, and many of the things were things that we did outside, not inside. Now that many people is constrained or where they can go, a lot of that stress was a vacation, a long weekend going somewhere. Now everything needs to be where you are, and we really were not ready for that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's remarkable the number of mental health applications that are out there and that have really come to the fore in that time frame.
Right, right. I remember quite a few years ago, my first trip to Canada was I was invited by McGill University to their Distinguished Educator Seminar Series. They said we're doing a 2-day workshop on health. It was health and fitness. And I'm thinking, now, why do they want me? A slightly overweight, gray-headed guy that has never run a marathon in it. Well, what are they talking? And they said, it's 2 days. Day number 1, it's the physical aspects of health. Day number 2, it's the mental aspects. And that's why we want you. It's stress. It's organization, time management, productivity. It's relationship with reducing stress. And I thought, they understand. They get it. And it turned out to be a wonderful day. I don't know what they talked about that first day, but we know having a system is important. It takes us from being good to being excellent to being outstanding to being great, that kind of thing. I think right now having a system is the difference between sinking and swimming.
Yeah, I like that point, Frank, because, if you think about what creates stress, change creates stress. And the number of changes that have happened over the past few months and are continuing to unfold, there's such a level of unpredictability that is creating a huge amount of stress. And systems have a way of standardizing things. They take things and make order and make it more predictable for us. And so I agree. And I've seen that in the workplace that, well, I've led with some, I talk a lot about productivity and critical thinking and management. The topic that keeps coming up in my conversations with business leaders is around burnout. And I've recently launched a burnout recovery retreat, and that has been kind of the most popular thing over the last few months of people, whether it's technically burnout or not, just this sense of like, how do I make sense of everything that's happening and continue to refuel myself in the midst of a changing, uncertain environment.
Yeah. And I think once this whole pandemic is over, that's when we're going to see even greater change. When everything is back open again, all of a sudden, all at once, are we going to be ready? Are our systems going to be good enough that when we can kick into high gear, into life as we knew it before, that we're ready to do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to just point out to folks kind of the importance of self-care in this environment, not just systems, which I think is absolutely paramount, and both of you are on point here related to that. But the real goal here is to have some level of understanding of what self-care means. And, like for me, like being in both a global pandemic with both family and friends who have been affected by it, like having to go to funerals for elderly people. Those are things that I'm fairly resilient to, but I know that they affect me. And so we all have to kind of step back and take a little bit of heart, a little bit of awareness to the reality of it all, and figure out what for you kind of de-stresses you? What releases the pressure valves for you? I've had to step back from certain volunteer projects. I've had to step back from certain other projects at work just because I know it's just too much at the moment, right? And that, of course, causes friction for me because, as you can all imagine, I like being productive and I like taking on more than other people can. But I also recognize the importance and power of stepping back at this time and really taking stock of what I have. Being thankful for what I have. I'm extremely lucky in life, with my family and friends and my work and everything else like that. So just taking a stock of that has been actually very, very powerful, and doing self-care in that environment. I also want to note that there are so many different resources, and I'll put all of these into the video description as well as the show notes for those who are listening to the show after the fact. But the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, they have a national helpline, which is free, confidential, 24/7, 365. And so you can call that number. We'll put that into the listing there, but it's 800-662-HELP, 4357. And then I've also put a list to checkpoint.org, which has global mental health resources. So no matter what country you're listening to us from, if you just scroll through the list, whatever that issue might be, whether it be substance abuse, whether it be a mental illness, you can go through the list and choose the appropriate contact information for the resources that are available to you. But go get help if you need it. This is not the time to think that you're a tough guy or gal or other. You decide to get help because you're watching us and you want to be productive. So you can't be productive if you're not taking care of really, the other half of yourself, which is your internal mental well-being. Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
Go for it, Matt.
Yeah, one thing just to jump on that, Ray, is one of the things I like to do for myself and for others is to go through the exercise of defining, I use the term sustainability. What would have to be true in order for you to feel like your work-life situation is sustainable? Because most people have a vague notion of, I need things to be balanced, I need to have a manageable work life, but they haven't articulated specifically in a way that affects their actions what needs to be true in order for them to feel that sense of sustainability. And so going through the exercise of actually defining that, and usually I talk about defining it for a season because, as we all know, seasons change. That might be different in 3 months from now, 6 months, but taking the time to define what would have to be true can be helpful even as you think about the next 3 months.
All right, and so with that, we are going to move our way along to the stories of the week. And what I want to let folks know who are watching us, at least live, if you're watching us live, you can feel free to leave a comment in the chat. If you're at least in the YouTube live, you can leave a comment in the chat, and we'll be able to see those and bring those onto screen and answer those if you have any questions or comments or thoughts. Feel free to add them. We'll be happy to go ahead and provide that. And I'm sure as the weeks go on, we'll get better at all of this, and we'll be able to interact with everybody more and invite more people to the show as well, which I'm looking forward to doing. So welcome all of you who are watching live. This is really a lot of fun. We're going to do the stories of the week. We're going to break that up into 2 parts, and in essence, we're going to cover what stories we have this week. And just as a point of note, we've now broken the show up into the stories of the week and, in essence, productivity app updates. In essence, a change log of all of the various apps that are out there. There are hundreds of them, but we try to point out the highest level ones that we think are most important for us to really dive into. So we're going to get into the stories of the week, and if any of them require me to bring them up on screen, I can do that also. So gentlemen, if you need me to, let me know. But let's start off with our first story, which is Ulysses 21. I'm going to guess that's you, Augusto. So Augusto, what's going on with Ulysses?
Ulysses is a fantastic application. They do a software for writing that is really incredible. And they add a new integration where you can now do revision mode. So think on Grammarly, but imagine Grammarly inside of your document in the software writing that you are using to write. So you can now don't need to go and copy or use the browser. You can do it all in one. And for people who write copywriters and tech writers, Ulysses is one of those software that works incredibly well. You can do Markdown, you can do many other things. And now having that ability really make it powerful. So let me throw the question, or should we go into the news? This is a beautiful thing with the first episode. We can invent or get a slap in the wrist later. What you guys are doing? Any of you guys use something like Grammarly to check those things? I know Microsoft has also their solution. I am not the right person to ask about Microsoft products because I tend to be not the most updated person since I live on the iPad. But did you use any of those things, and why or why not?
Yeah, I use Grammarly. I use actually just the free version, and it's amazing. It catches your spelling, of course, but then also just word usage and suggesting a simpler word for something. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I've gotten.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I write much better emails as a result of it.
I've gotten to the point where I actually, because I use Microsoft Office, and I'll type something up in Word, and then if I want to make sure, because Word will catch the obvious spelling errors and some clear grammatical errors, but then I'll often just drop it into a blank Google Doc and have Grammarly check it just to make sure that there's nothing, because it does seem to catch kind of next level things that Word's spell check seems to have focused on being concise now. So every time I use a contraction, for example, it's always calling that out. But yeah, Grammarly does seem to pick up on some of the other points there.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Google, and so I use Google Docs, and it does really everything that I need it to do in terms of editing things. And I will frequently paste things into the system just for it to look at it and tell me what needs correction and otherwise. There is the Hemingway app, and I'll put this in the show notes as well. But the Hemingway app is a web-based editor, and if you just take your text and throw it into Hemingway, it'll go ahead and just really eviscerate you in terms of your really long sentences, Raymond.
Yeah.
So I get good tongue lashing every time I use Hemingway.
Yeah, where was Hemingway app when I was in high school? I mean,
ditto.
It's literally every high school student, every middle school student needs to know HemingwayApp.com. You just paste your stuff in there. Check your ego at the door now, because it's going to mark your long, this is hard to read. This is very hard to read. This is passive voice. And when you can make the colors go away, you're going to go, this is better. So
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that you mentioned that as an educator, because we have a discussion recently here in my household, because my 11-year-old was using Grammarly on her school. And we had the opposite sides. I believe it was a good thing to do, and my wife wasn't sure. So it's good to hear from an educator the value that has for students.
Mm-hmm. Because you can imagine if you're an English teacher and you're having to sit down with 120 papers and mark all this stuff and get it back to the kid a week after he originally composed it. Imagine without the teacher having to do any of that, for the student to be able to self-correct, for the student to be able to throw that thing in there, see all those colors happen, make some changes, watch the colors go away. And of course, after a while, you start to get a feel of what Hemingway app is going to mark and what Grammarly is going to mark, for that matter. The student fixes it so that the teacher's doing less work and being able to concentrate on the higher end things rather than marking passive voice, run-on sentence. Let automation handle some of this.
Absolutely. All right, moving along. What is this about Nebo? Next story up is Nebo 2.7, and this is more in the education space. So what does Nebo 2.7 do for us, Augusto?
So Nebo, it's an app, with all this Apple Pencil and the writing on the screen comes Nebo. And Nebo is a digital notebook on every application really, but on the iPad is obviously where I use it. And one of the things that allows you to do is not only to handwrite notes, but only convert them into actual text, into actual characters into that. So it makes it a really really powerful tool to take notes in class and take the craft, and it can make different notes. What Nevo it's doing that is really, really amazing now, they are really, they took it to the next level for the students. So basically, if your student can use Nevo, and that's Nevo, by the way, it's made by the people of a script. So they have a long story of handwriting and text conversion and all that. And now you can do faster notes, faster syncing, faster editing on the notes. On the previous version 2.5, it was challenging to edit some of the things. So now it's a lot better. You can do sharing, you can do organizing. The organizing in the past was, I used to take mine from there to another app. Now you can do it in there. And same thing for the kids to share. So that way, not only they get the benefit of the handwriting, but then select it all and try and convert that into actual text to be able to do more. So it's an incredible app. I think so.
Fantastic. All right. Next up, we have the Facebook portal. If folks don't know what the Facebook portal is, it is a device that Facebook, that is of Facebook.com fame, they have created this device that is a video conferencing tool that you use your Facebook account to be able to have video communications with family members and friends. And now they are supporting Zoom. And so this whole idea is that now you can potentially collaborate with coworkers and friends using Zoom on the portal. Does anybody have a portal? Is anybody going to use the portal for Zoom?
I have a portal. I don't necessarily understand the use case here, though I know Facebook is pushing their Workplace application, to try to get teams using that. So I'm guessing that it's a push further in that direction. But yeah, it's hard to see, exactly how that would be used, except as an external camera potentially, so that you don't, you could locate it somewhere else and have a different angle, or so that you could be looking up at a different screen.
Yeah, I have a Facebook account, and I continue to use Facebook because I have to. Not that I have to, but I have family and friends on Facebook. But it'll be a cold day on planet Earth when I put a Facebook device in my house and start communicating with clients over it. No, it's just not going to happen. So
I don't think for that, but for the family, as you said, it is cool. One of the things we have been doing now is doing an every other week we do dinner with my in-laws, and we do it that way because of the distance. So it's a way to keep the communication. But if you try to put the laptop and all that, that feels too intrusive for them. While a device like this feels more natural.
And what is really nice about the portal is the camera functionality, especially if you're in a group, is that it adjusts in real time to the people that are on the frame. And so, if somebody comes in, then it will zoom out a little bit, or if they leave, it will zoom in. And so that's nice, particularly if you're trying to do some type of group-based video conferencing, which in the Workplace application is certainly not happening too much of right now, but you could imagine in the future that could potentially be helpful.
Definitely. Okay, moving along to our next story is Google Meet. And those of you who are in the education space, you probably are using Google Meet in some way, shape, or form for your children to be schooling at home and otherwise. But Google Meet has brought the ability to do breakout rooms akin to the Zoom functionality that we were just talking about. Zoom is the video conferencing platform, and so now Google is trying to match all the features of all of the other video conferencing tools like Microsoft Teams and otherwise. So they've brought breakout rooms to the G Suite for Education space, and so it's currently available there. And anybody going to use Google Meet breakout rooms either? I'm curious. Oh, there we go. Augusto.
I don't know if the breakout rooms, but I use Google Meet for most of my meetings, even more than Zoom, because I have it for the company. So I really do more meets than what I do Zoom. So I'm sure eventually we'll get to meet.
Yeah. I will note that I am the Google Small Business Advisor for Productivity, so you can't find a bigger fan of Google products. However, every time anyone on the Google team, Google Small Business, anybody in my client world, they say, hey, you want to have a meeting? I immediately gravitate toward my Zoom account. And when they say, oh, can we meet via Google Meet? I kind of grumble because I'm just used to all the functions within Meet. And so it just becomes an additional tool that I don't want to have to use in order to be able to make things happen. But I'm really excited to see them bring feature parity to do more in that space to be able to make the product better. And I hope that they bring more Google Meet features to the point where I don't need Zoom anymore. I mean, I don't mind keeping it all inside of the Google sphere. I'm the last person who would be worried about that. But at the same time, I just see the features that Zoom has brought to the platform and the stability. And quite honestly, Zoom always makes me look better than Google.
Yeah. And, if I was a classroom teacher today and I was using Google Meet, I would definitely do the breakout rooms, adding some variety. Back when everything was face to face, we're talking about student engagement and adding variety. Don't just stand up there and lecture. And so we're kind of having to go through the same kind of thing virtually now. And that's one of the tools we have. Break up in those small groups, come back together, discuss.
Absolutely. All right. So, anything else about Google Meet? Otherwise, we're going to move on to Apple Bear and their Panda release. And so, who uses Apple Bear here? Does anybody use Apple Bear? No? Okay. I play with it because I feel like I have to. And so they've actually released a couple of really interesting new pieces. So they are doing kind of some interesting things in the note-taking space. So that's pretty much it. They've brought YAML support, if you guys know what YAML support is. If you don't worry about it. You'll never use it. But the idea is that they're really improving the platform and bringing new features and improvements to the fold. And so they have some minor markdown advancements and some emoji support and some other things like that are really quite nice to see. But either way, Apple Bear is out there for those who are interested in that note-taking space. And then continuing on in the note-taking space, Obsidian, one of their major releases that has recently come out, version 0.9.2. So Obsidian is a local note-taking software, right? You install it and then you have it available on your desktop computers. And one of the features that it has brought is the ability to do what they call the publish service. Now, publish service is an add-on service. It's one of the paid items that you need to be able to do this. What it means now is that you can publish web pages, basically publish note pages to the public web using the tool, which is kind of nice to be able to go ahead and publish from the system. I know that I'm not particularly interested in the Obsidian interface, but I do appreciate its kind of different flavor that it's bringing to the note-taking space, and the ability for you to kind of link and backlink between notes so that you have this kind of richer visual ontology that I think not a lot of other productivity tools are focused on. So that's really quite interesting. Any Obsidian users out there, let me know and we can talk about that. But any thoughts on Obsidian, Apple Bear so far? Feel free to hop in. And so, all right, with that, I just wanted to make a quick note. One of our colleagues, Francesco D'Alessio, he has just published a new course, which is called Obsidian Made Simple. He and one of his colleagues, I believe it is, put together this course. There's kind of a beginner, intermediate, and advanced section of the course, and I'll put a link to the Thinkific link up in the show notes for anybody who's interested. But it's $59 US, and you can go ahead and check out all the various functionalities of Obsidian, and kind of its main rival, I guess, is Roam Research. Those are the two kind of competing with one another, and so they put out this course, and so I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Francesco and that. Next up in news, then, that brings us along. Lee, hi Lee, how's it going? Lee says he loves Obsidian, so we have an Obsidian fan in the house. I don't know what you would call the demonym for an Obsidian user. I mean, an Obsidian Obsidianite. It would be a difficult one to say, Obsidian. But anyway, next up, we're going to talk a little bit about GoodNotes. GoodNotes has provided some updates, and the most interesting thing, kind of continuing on in this kind of education and note-taking space, is that they've actually added a flashcard feature, and actually Augusto is the GoodNotes expert, but he has clued me into GoodNotes, and now I use it on my iPad, and it's become really my handwritten note-taking device of choice. It seems to start trumping my Everlast Rocketbook notebook sometimes, except for the fact that my Rocketbook has automation functions tied to Evernote. So GoodNotes still is a limited tool for me, because if I want to automate from notes to system, that workflow, being able to tie directly to Evernote, is really just too powerful for me to give up. But I really do love the fluidity of GoodNotes and so on and so forth. So Augusto, have you played with the flashcards feature yet?
I have played with the flashcards. I have get my daughter to play with the flashcards, and the only downside of that is her iPad do not have Apple Pencil. So every time now she wants to build cards, she wants my iPad. That is not a good deal. That was not my intention. So that's something that needs to be fixed pretty soon. But other than that, it is really amazing on the sense that you can go build them, have them with the colors, do the drawing. It is a really, really powerful. So it's, as a tool, again, what we were talking into that translation into create them and make the things for them easier and cool too, because as we were talking at the beginning of the show about the teachers or the struggle, I think also we cannot ignore the kids and the struggles they are having for all this. So their struggle is also real. So tools like this that can make the creation of those flashcards cool and fun are really, really important.
I will note that the GoodNotes flashcards feature also provides you with spaced repetition. And for those of you who don't know, it's basically an algorithm that shows content to you based on whether or not you get it right or wrong when you look at that flashcard. And so then it goes ahead and interleaves the content in that sense, so that you can see it over and over again until you get it right, and you have reinforced it in that sense. And it's a pretty effective strategy for memorizing things. And so I'm really excited. I am currently studying a foreign language, and I want to continue to keep studying it. And now I'm thinking, the current tool that I'm using, whether or not I need to make the migration to GoodNotes at the present moment to continue with that, I think it'd be fun. But I see the real value in being able to do these kinds of drawings. I mean, the example they show is chemistry, and just being able to outline and show the chemical bonds and the chemical structures, and then being able to see those over and over again in that kind of fluid environment, I just think is really brilliant, and I'm looking forward to playing around with it more.
And then we go to your flavor of the week. So let's talk about the green elephant. By the way, since this was random that the Evernote was put just after GoodNotes, but I will say I'm sure GoodNotes is coming to replace that Rocketbooks.
Oh, no. It is a great tool, and I have no problem with having many tools for the things that I use. But the really interesting thing that happened this past week is that Evernote launched its new desktop applications, and so I happen to be the Evernote regional leader for North America, or one of them. There are three of us. Evernote regional. There are 8 global Evernote regional leaders, and I'm one of them for North America. And actually, we have Dr. Frank Buck, who's also an Evernote certified consultant, on the panel today. And so we've been very excited about seeing the new desktop applications for macOS and Windows launch. This is version 10, leapfrogging all the numbers between 6 and 10. So we went from 6.25 to 10. What I'm really finding is that, one, you can actually run if you're on Windows and Mac, it seems as though on the Windows system I'm able to run Evernote for Windows 10 alongside 6.25, and so I'm running both of them concurrently, and I will probably continue running them concurrently as long as Evernote allows me to. And then we will watch as Evernote has really rebuilt the product from the ground up, we have some missing elements from Evernote right now. There are just some missing features. Some will come back to the system, and some I believe Evernote has just decided they will no longer give energy toward, and so they'll be discarding. We've been working to try and figure out what the complete list is. That is the users in the forum, but I think that ultimately this will make for a better Evernote. I know that there's a rampant criticism of any technology product when they make these kinds of big changes. And certainly everyone could have done things better, but I'm really excited. I have to say, I'm just glad to rip the Band-Aid off, have the new applications out, watch to see the team put out new releases every 2 weeks, and for us to see what and where Evernote goes. I interviewed Ian Small, who's the CEO of Evernote, a few weeks ago, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. And what Ian said to me in the interview really still resonates today, and that was that you may not be necessarily pleased with Evernote today. I don't think he said that. I'll put words in his mouth, but in a year from now, you'll be glad you stuck with it, and that was really the sentiment that he tried to put forward to us, and I'm really quite bullish on the future of Evernote because of what he talked to me about in that interview, and so I'm just really excited to have it out. Frank, did you have any comments or thoughts you wanted to add?
Well, I think you covered it pretty well. One of my projects over the next couple of days is to download the desktop version of the new Windows on my laptop, and then continue to run the old one on my desktop and just see what the features are that are missing. What I can live with not having right now, and what I may have lost that's fairly critical. I think it's so good that now we're more on the same page, that instead of it looking one way on Windows, it looks one way on Mac, it looks one way on the web, that no matter where you are, it's going to look the same. For the long haul, it's just going to be better for Evernote. And whereas, every time there was a development, they had to write code differently for each platform, it's going to be so much easier to move forward with all of it looking the same.
I like to think also that is going to be a significant help for users, because one of the things with Evernote is, because of the way it was built, it was really different on functionality and how it looks and how it acts, depending the device that you pick. And I think those kind of things make it difficult for users, because it takes the invisibility out of the tool. One of the more invisible the tool is, the more powerful it is, and I believe in that. So the more you can go and pick your Mac or pick your iPad or pick your phone and have that invisibility for the tool, the more you will use it and the more power it will get. So I'm hoping that now with this, really Evernote accomplished that invisibility all around.
Yeah, the synchronicity across the applications, basically the same interface, is really the ultimate goal.
And for those of us that teach this stuff, imagine going out and doing a workshop on Evernote, especially one for beginners, and to not have to say, okay, now if you're on Windows, it looks like this. If you're on Mac, it looks like this. If you're on the web, it looks like that. It looks like this, period. It much easier.
Yeah, I think that will be really powerful in the midterm.
Yeah, every time someone says to me, "Oh, what is the desktop application?" They kept asking me what the desktop application was going to look like, and I would just say, "Go to evernote.com and log in." That's what it's going to look like, and that's a huge advantage now in the system. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Evernote has to offer going forward. Obviously we're going to have a few steps backward in this process before we have several steps forward, and I'm prepared for that. I'm preparing my clients for that, and I just think that ultimately it was something that needed to be done, and they're doing it. We're going to slog through it. Evernote's going to get obviously a hit. There are other great competitors out there. We just noted a few of them, plus Notion and others. People can play and figure out what tools work for them. And in a year from now, I will have been glad to stay with Evernote for my primary hub. And I truly believe that. And if I'm not, then well, we'll assess that when we get there, right? But the end of the day is that Evernote has satisfied my needs for the better part of 11 years since I installed the application. Today, while it's missing a few features that I kind of like, I continue to use 6.25. And no hiccup there. I get to play around with basically best of both worlds. And as long as they continue to support the new system and allow us to be able to run the older version until they get the new one parity with the older version, I'm not really going to sweat it. I'm just going to continue to use those on my production devices and play on my test systems with the new versions and have a great time and see as they put out new additions. And but either way, I'm just really excited for the future features. Once they get to feature parity is one thing, but the future features that they can now build kind of on the fly and at speed of modern development is really the part that excites me. And we have a lot to talk about over the coming months as they start to push out these new updates. So I'm looking forward to what Ian and his team are doing. Okay. We have one more story before we take a break, and that story is back to Google, because, why not? But what is Google doing, Augusto? They brought a new feature to the Pixel line, and they'll probably roll this out, of course, to the other Pixel devices before they go out to the broader Android ecosystem. But what was the feature they announced?
I really want them to have them on the iOS platform. Is where I want it. Again, it's the Pixel is going to have a feature called Say Goodbye to Hold Music. So basically, when you get into a call where you get that fantastic hold music, you will be able to tell your Pixel device, listen this for me and let me know when I'm ready. And the Pixel will let you know when a real person answer on the other side, so you don't need to enjoy and the pleasure of the music. So torture is going to be over soon if you have a Pixel device. For iOS users, I'm sorry, that's not available.
Yeah, so the feature is called Hold for Me, and so there used to be actually a third-party service that did this, and then they kind of folded. But in essence, you would punch your own phone number in and say that you wanted to connect with, say, Verizon support, and you would plug your phone number in, and then it would dial them and wait on hold for you. And then when it came off of hold, it would say, "Hey, I'm calling on behalf of Ray, and you should go ahead and hold while I connect him." And then it would dial me, and I would pick up the phone, and there would be the customer service representative. Whether it waited for an hour or 30 minutes, I didn't have to wait. Now Google is doing this through its own machine learning technology, and it's facilitating that process. And of course, they've learned a lot from having Google Voice, and now they're bringing those technologies together in the interface. So Pixel 4a users and I think Pixel 5 users are getting it first, and then they'll scale it back to probably the other Pixel devices and then beyond that. But it's really quite phenomenal to see this artificial intelligence out of Google really coming to really real-world application and real-world usage.
So then now the customer support representative, et cetera, they'll be on hold just for a little while you pick up.
You got it.
That's all right. That's fair.
Right now, if you use Google's technology in Google Maps on a Pixel device, I think actually on any Android device, you can have them actually call and make a reservation for you, and it's using the same kinds of technology in their Google AI sphere. And what it does is it calls the restaurant, and basically an artificially intelligent software is talking to the human and scheduling things like hair appointments or restaurant reservations and that kind of thing. This is taking that to the next level in being able to do this on-hold functionality for us. So we're just going to see more and more of this really powerful technology take hold.
Yeah. Now, I'd seen that advertised on one of the Google events. So is that only available for the Pixel now?
Correct. So you have to have either the 4a or the 5G versions right now. Then they'll scale it back and give it out to the others, but they'll bring it to the other Pixel phones probably thereafter, and then they'll probably bring it to everyone who's on the most updated version of Android 11 after that. But it's one of those things. It's like any other fancy new software. They want to give it to their top line folks and then trickle it down to the rest of us. So with that, we're going to take a break and be back in just a minute for a word from our sponsor.
Did you know half of small businesses don't have websites and half don't make it past 1 year in business? Are these stats correlated? We're not sure, but we think you should have a website. W3C Web Services provides affordable managed WordPress website hosting along with VPS, domain name registration, and other small business-focused services. For listeners of this podcast, you can book a free 30-minute digital marketing strategy session when you purchase a new hosting plan, $150 value. Once you purchase your new hosting plan, forward the receipt to support@w3cinc.com with the podcast title in the subject line of the email message, and we'll get you scheduled for your digital marketing strategy session. Head over. Did you know?
Oh, well, I'll... I somehow ended that before it was supposed to, but this is what happens in first times out. Anyway, welcome back everybody to Anything But Idle, and we're gonna continue on with the show. And so what we're going to do is do our second set of headlines and second set of stories of the week. And so with that, let's pick up in the second part of the stories with a little news out of Remember the Milk. So Remember the Milk has released their home screen widgets on iOS 14. So if you have an iOS device that is running version 14 or later, you now get home screen widgets, which is just phenomenal. And for those of us who are Remember the Milk users, I'm excited to have that come to the system. Okay, next up, Facebook has brought something to the Facebook Oculus world. And so if you don't know, Facebook has a tool, has a platform called Oculus. It is a virtual reality headset company that they purchased a few years ago. And with the Oculus Quest 2, Facebook is in essence trying to bring those people who are remote working or working from home into a virtual workspace. So this is, I think, remarkable, and I'm curious to hear what you all have to say about this. But in essence, the company is trying to create an immersive workplace experience so those people who are working from home can join something they call the Infinite Office. And the Infinite Office will basically, you put on this Oculus Quest 2 headset, and then you're brought into a layout of what would be an kind of a dual world, your office in virtual reality, and you are there with your colleagues, so to speak, in a virtual sense. What do you think this is all about? Do you think it'll work? Do you think people will use this? What do you think is the use case here for the Oculus VR headset in a virtual workspace environment?
That's just a little far out there for me, to be honest. I think those who are working at home are seeing some definite advantages of working at home, and to me, it seems like that headset might give you back some of the things that you were trying to get away from to start with.
I wonder if things like this, I don't know in the workspace. Okay, I don't know if I want to be that integrated to the workspace and the other people, but schools will be a good thing for the kids to have a more immersive experience of the classroom. So instead of feeling they are at home instead of the classroom, if they can be integrated with that, the kid could feel and then see the teacher on front, but in one, and then could see at the sides and see other kids. That may be more interesting. On the workplace, I don't know. These things, this kind of headset for me, give me the idea of gaming more than the idea of serious work. I can envision, the flight simulator, the cars, those kind of games. But I don't know if I want to be able to see around my work environment that way. I'm not completely sure.
Yeah, I think it's really going to take some time, and so it's a little clunky to have that device on your head. I can't imagine being in a workspace for 8 hours with that thing on my head. Even if I took a break, it would just be a little bit much. And even with the now deprecated Google, Dream headsets, the VR headsets that they had out, it was a bit much to have the weight of your iPhone on your face inside of this mask, and enclosure. And so if they can get it down to kind of Google Glass level, or with the Bose smart glasses that are out there now, the Amazon glasses that are out there now. We're starting to see more and more of these. If they did a more augmented reality style headset that was glasses with maybe, as Bose does, it's a what do you call it? Conductive bone conduction, audio. So you're not having things in your ears necessarily. You can wear it in a much more natural way. You're actually capable of being productive and seeing augmented reality of maybe avatars of your coworkers or their video feeds of your coworkers in an augmented space, similar to the way that Microsoft Teams currently has those kind of stadium seating inside of the environment. Now you can put yourself around a round table, for example, and actually truly feel like you're in a round table. It is not going to feel real, but it's going to feel much more facilitated in the space than you just having like us, 4 squares, rectangles up on a screen, right? Like it'll feel better. And I think there's something very powerful to that. It just needs to get there. And I'm sure the technology will get even better as the ability to have 3-dimensional highly rich visuals can be placed out in the physical space around us.
But it is, because if I remember the first time we traveled to Disneyland and we saw Disney World and we saw Futureland, and this is 1990, 80 something, and I remember that they describing this exactly thing we are doing right now, the communication and the video, like the Jetsons, okay? And people saying, oh, that will be so uncomfortable. We will never do that. We will never be ready to do that. Well, look at this. This pandemic is making us do this, 8 hours a day. So, and then on top of that, we do it with family after hours. So I may not see it right now, how that is going to work. I'm not a technologist on that sense to be able to see the future, but I could see how things like this could help to many things, and that you said, maybe negotiations, maybe a round table, maybe something that is useful. I don't know. Again, I don't see it as of today.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people talking about the desire, and whether this is good or bad, in terms of interruptions and the ability to focus. I hear a lot of professionals talking about the desire to be able to just kind of swing by someone's desk, to drop in, to collaborate informally without having to use an online communication channel. So I can imagine there being some interest in this. I think a lot of it too would come down to what is the company culture and policy surrounding it. So is it something where you always have to be on and you always have to be available because that will replicate some of the harms that we've already seen, or could it be something that you can kind of exit and kind of leave and then come into selectively at times? So like everything, combining those behavioral aspects to it to make it function in a way that would be optimal.
All right, let's move on then to some more news. So just ever so briefly, I mentioned Notion earlier. Notion has now created a community workspace, which is a template gallery. So they now have launched the ability to look at templates that they, or I'm guessing people can go ahead and submit their own to the template gallery, as well as the ones that Notion themselves has produced. And so if you go to notion.community, you can go ahead and see the templates that are available there in their Notion community workspace. And it's great to have templates. I think it's really just easier to use some tools when you have a quick upstart to all of the pieces. And so next up, Augusto, some news out of MindNode, the mind mapping software.
I love MindNode, and it's one of those applications that I use, and I have never considered having a MindNode on the widgets as something that is open. So when this news came to my hands, it was really interesting, and I can start using a mind map as a capture device instead of other things. So it was really interesting to be able to go from the widget directly into that mind map, and now they even have the ability to handwrite, and the iPad convert that handwriting into text. So that can really change the way you mind map in devices like the iPad with iOS 14. They add a couple of things to that. They fix the Apple Watch and the things you can do with the Apple Watch and the synchronization and the iCloud container. But the most important things, two things are those. One is the ability to open a mind map as a something really quick, but more importantly, to be able to handwrite into that mind map and transform that using iOS 14 into actual text. I think
so. This is using Apple Scribble basically
that's
to
correct.
be able to writing into the field. That's phenomenal. That's great. And then moving along, Omnifocus got some updates. You want to talk to us about some Omnifocus updates?
Of course. So 3.10 is out, and they have basically three new things. Date picker. So on iOS 14, again, they updated how you select. iOS 14 changed how you pick the dates and the times into what they think is a new and more effective way. We can argue about that, but I think it's like everything. Okay, some people was really used to the old ways, and now these new ways, we can argue about the more effective, but they also add a larger font for the watch that for some people who is getting older, it's really useful. I don't know anything about that. Not going to admit anything, but and also some minimum updates that they did. But I think the most important thing is the date picker and the large font for the people as a complication type.
Fantastic. Moving right along then, I'm just going to talk a little bit about IFT. For those of you who don't know what IFT is, it is a web-based automation service. So you can tie different web-based tools together. So like say if you tweet something on Twitter, then it can capture that into Evernote. So it's kind of if this, then that, which is where its name comes from. Well, they have gone to a paid platform for those folks who want to use the tool beyond kind of the basics. And so they call it IFT Pro, and they also have what is now IFT Platform, which is for businesses to be able to create their own IoT automation stuff. Either way, they have gone to a pay what you want model to start with, as low as I think $1.99 a month. And this opportunity to set your own monthly price will last. They've extended it until October 31st, 2020, and so you can name whatever price you want, as low as I think $1.99. On November 1st, it's going to switch over to a fixed price of $3.99 per month. So if I were you, I would go in and lock in a price if you ever think you're going to use IFT Pro. I've been an IFT user across multiple accounts for many years, and I immediately upgraded all the accounts because I figured, they have done so much for me over the years. It's worth giving them just a nominal amount of money to be able to satisfy all of the too many IFT accounts that I have.
Well, Ray, that's definitely updated from what I had heard. I think it was like October 6th was the deadline. So first of all, they've extended the deadline, and secondly, then the price, because it was going to be $10 a month, and so they've lowered that now to $3.99.
They're going to set it at the low bar of $3.99.
The low bar, yeah. So that, and I thought, man, $10 a month. That's, I love if this then that, but especially the new user who doesn't already see a number of ways they could use it, to pay $120 a year, which is what it would have been. That's more than your Microsoft Office. That's a lot more than Evernote, so forth and so on. So I thought, well, a lot can happen in a year. I locked in $1.99 immediately. Back when they said, for the next year, I thought, okay, a lot can happen in a year. I'll do $1.99 and we'll see what happens over the course of the next year. Well, it turned out over the course of the next week, they said, if you lock in the $1.99 and give you the name your price, is forever, not a year, but forever. So I was telling everybody I knew, go get it now. So even the people who missed it, they still haven't missed it.
Yep, they have until October 31st, but don't do it. Don't wait till November 1st, because then you're gonna pay double.
No.
And so with IFT Pro, you're actually capable of not only creating custom applets, but also now doing similar things to Zapier, which is having multi-step applets where you can have multiple steps in the same automation, which I just, again, I just think it's a phenomenal tool, and its ability to automate things where you don't need to be involved in just very rote mechanisms. I'm very happy to see it come to pass.
And Ray, like one thing for all those people out there, and there's so many that have an Instagram account and a Twitter account, and they want to post to both. Well, and I know people say, well, shoot, you can do that automatically. You can post on Instagram and you can flip that little switch and it'll go over to Twitter. But what goes over to Twitter is just a link back to your picture. But if you do it with if this, then that, if on Instagram I post a new post, then on Twitter post, you get the full image. That in itself is just phenomenal for somebody that has that particular need.
Yeah, I mean, just for the social media components is just saves so much time, and I really, really love it.
Yeah. And
okay.
is it still going to be? They have a free plan, but 3 applets.
You got it. So on October 31st, you'll have through October 31st to archive anything above the 3 custom applets. So if they're branded applets, that means the company is paying for you to be able to have access to those pre-templated applets. Those you don't pay for. It's the ones that you're creating customized, which are most of mine, and so the reality is above that you're going to have until October 31st to archive them, and then they'll go ahead and cease to operate until you upgrade to IFT Pro. All right, this takes us on to a conversation that I think will be very interesting. So Wired magazine in the UK had a Work Smarter article that came out that said email is broken and this company has a plan to fix it. And that company is Superhuman. And this is the company built by Raul Vora. He's the founder and CEO of Superhuman. And in essence, they claim to be the fastest email client in the world. And so they say they're not just another email client. They basically have built email inboxes from the ground up to make it this very subtle and minimalistic interface, user experience, while at the same time being fast. They have what they call the 100 millisecond rule. That is, every interaction should be near instantaneous. And what's interesting to me is really not the application itself, but in this context of now we have Hey, which is built by the folks at Basecamp, the 37 Signals formerly company. David Hannemeyer Hansen and the team over there, DHH as he's best known, is actually the progenitor of Ruby on Rails, for those of you who are of a geeky sentiment. And so he's fairly notable in the world, but they've launched Hey.com, which is a whole new email service. So just like you have at gmail.com with Google, at outlook.com or at live.com on the Microsoft side, they have in essence created a new email service, and they're charging $99 per year. You get an at hey.com email address, and that's actually a permanent email address. So even if you left the service, that email will permanently forward to an email address of your choice into perpetuity. But Superhuman is basically creating a client for you, and they're charging, $30 per month for you to have access to this email client. And I'm really curious. Vora seems to think that people are going to be willing to pay for email clients as much as Hey is thinking that people are going to pay for a highly opinionated new email service with clients built on top of it. And I'm really curious about this whole world in productivity, whether or not the market can sustain it when you have major tech giants who are basically giving us email for free. And to be quite honest, Gmail is doing some really innovative features, and I don't seem to have a problem with using those tools for those things. Now, on the Outlook side, much to be desired, but it's still doing some phenomenal things, and I'm not paying extra for it. What are your thoughts in terms of whether the Superhumans of the world and the Heys and other platforms like that can really exist and withstand the market forces?
I think one of the problem is, where is the perceived value of this? And it's not if it's valuable or not. People were excited about a different way to see email when Hey came. And what Superhuman brings, in theory, is an integration with that contact and their whole social media and their whole thing plus the AI. If you are on certain buckets, they don't need really everybody to come to the platform. And I actually think the price is set up to take people out of the platform. But if they can convince high level salespeople, for example, high level salespeople, I used to, when I was doing high ticket sales, I lived in LinkedIn. Why? Because it allows me to see what was happening in people's lives. If I can, at that time, could get a platform for $30 a month who do that work for me and put it in front of me, I will have paid that happily because in one deal, I will have covered the whole year. So it wasn't a big deal. What I think is it is a tool for a specific and particular audience, not necessarily productivity people, but really that high-end ticket people who are doing that manual work of going to Facebook, going to LinkedIn to find about their clients before they have a conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And certainly Superhuman has used this kind of exclusivity factor to try to drive the engagement, the stories around it. I think the other thing is, by and large, I would say most professionals still feel like email is a challenge, even despite, the numerous features in Gmail or even Outlook. And so as long as that continues to be the case, I think there will still be an appetite for new tools, whether their promises of solving those problems are really, just the way I talked to someone recently who's paying the $30 a month for Superhuman, and they're like, yeah, I basically just like the interface and the keyboard shortcuts because it feels like I can move around a little more quickly. But in reality, the functionality isn't too much different from what I use in Gmail. But I think as long as there's a dissatisfaction with the overall experience of managing one's email, we'll continue to look for other tools, whether or not they promise something dramatically different or not.
It's interesting, though, for me, because you have tools like Woven, which has come onto the market, and it's a calendaring software that's bringing new features. One feature that I particularly always need is a group calendaring functionality. What I mean by that is that I can send a link to all three of you gentlemen and be able to have you submit your times to the system and then be able to decide on a singular time frame for us to be able to get together. And that's a feature that was in my paid calendaring feature, and I'm the type of person, I don't have a problem spending money on the things that are going to help me be more productive. So I don't mind spending money on technology. I wouldn't be in this business if I didn't. But I spend a lot of money across it, and it feels like a death by a thousand cuts if I start paying for additional tools that are not providing me with really market changes in my productivity, but little marginal gains. And I can do all kinds of implementations that allow me in a workflow sense, or even using automation like with IFT or Zapier or local software like ActiveWords, where I'm able to increase my productivity by marginal gains, but I'm not spending more money to get there. And it seems like there are some people who are willing to throw money at these problems, and they're using tools that are not tried and true. And so they come to me and they say, okay, well, I need help with business process improvement. And I have to say to them, well, get rid of all of the junk you're using. And not to say that Superhuman is junk or anything like that. I have great respect for the technology, but it ends up being that they're just not using their current tools well. So if they use the current tools that they have to their full effect, all of a sudden, all of the compound benefits of what they currently are paying for versus what they're paying a premium for can be divided, and we can get rid of that other stuff and they can still be more productive from it. And then maybe sometime in the future they may decide to do that, but at least with the, I tend to deal with older executives, and so those older executives have no need or want, they see a shiny object and they want to be able to buy a solution to a problem. And then they realize they can't actually make those kinds of gains because it requires a specialized level of technological and technical skill with that application. And at the end of the day, if they've been using Outlook or if they've been using their email system for 20, 30 years and they're comfortable with it, it's just not sensible for them to make that kind of change. So I think it ends up being, segmenting yourself in perspective. You're comfortable with taking on high level technology and testing it in that space. cool, go for it, spend the extra $30 a month, and you'll see hopefully some compound gains. If you're not that person and you're not excited about taking on new technologies, don't waste your time. Don't get yourself mired in those kinds of details, and you'll be better off for it. So any final thoughts or go ahead.
I think it is like a WordPress installation. Okay. People come and think,
don't you start.
Oh, yes, I'm going to go there. I may get mute, but that's fine. Okay. People come and think on one problem that they are trying to solve, but don't think on the overall system. So when you go and say, well, my WordPress is really slow. Yeah, but you have 70,000 programs installed in that you really don't need. If you will have tried to solve the problem as a whole, you will have discovered. And I think this is one of those solutions. A lot of people don't know how to integrate those solutions. So they think on silos. Let me solve the email issue. But then you get, I'm not saying this solution, but you get other solutions, and then they can now integrate with the other things. So that's where you see, and now, yes, they gain productivity using this, but then they lose it in the other components, same as happened in a WordPress installation. And that's all that I'm going to say about that.
All right, let's move on to just a couple more stories this week, and then we can head into the final segments of the show. So there was recently a survey that was done, and an article that was written, and it was called "The 6 Trends on the Hype Cycle for the Digital Workplace in 2020." And we don't have time to really go into this deeply, but I did want to show you the Gartner study that actually kind of shows where all of these various technologies are, and kind of at the end where they call it plateau of productivity. And I just thought this was really interesting. So spend some time with it. I'll send a link out. I'll put a link to this in the video description in the show notes, so you can look at this and kind of muddle over it. But you can see where all of these various pieces are in the various timeline of development and what they call hype, or expectations as it relates to it on the. Is that y-axis? And so is that x or y-axis? I never get it right. So expectations are, I believe, on the y-axis. And so when we think about these things in terms of pieces, you can see here that at the very tail end of this, we have enterprise social networking applications, I'm guessing like Yammer and even Workplace by Facebook. I don't know. Anyway, and then you have cloud office software. And I actually am a little bit in disagreement with this, only because we now have tools like Collabora Online, which is an office suite in the cloud inside of things like Nextcloud, where they're really pushing the envelope of secure office editing, office document editing. And I think that my expectations are that we're going to actually see much more come out of cloud-based services in the future because of tools like Collabora. In essence, what they're really doing, and they just recently announced this at Nextcloud conference, is they have in essence a secure environment where you're editing documents, whether that be a text processing document, a word processing document, or an Excel type spreadsheet workbook. You're doing all of that where the document is actually secure on the server, and the user's only interacting with the document as kind of like, it's almost like being in a VM environment, in a VMware environment. You're just basically interacting with the document and manipulating it, but you actually don't have the document. And that creates this secure enclave for the documents in those spaces. And so even in something as seemingly mundane and kind of tried and true as cloud office, document, management and manipulation, I tend to think that there's a lot more that can be brought back into that hype space if the right press was around those types of documentation. But I just wanted to show it because I thought it was a really unique, chart and very interesting for people to kind of noodle over if you are so inclined.
So I'm going to use that we have the principal here in the room, and I'm going to ask you to go to your good notes and put one of those flashcards, and then you remember this. X to the left, Y to the sky. You will never forget that.
Yes,
like it.
it's always XY, but I if I'm talking, I can't do it. Like I can't move my hand
X
because
to
I
the left,
literally
Y to the sky.
every time I think of it, I have to do the hand gesture. Otherwise, I can't get it right. Anyway, so next up, Microsoft Edge is actually going to now be able to, in Apple iOS 14, be made the default browser on iOS and iPad. And so, Augusto, you can probably clarify this for us. What this means is that we'll be able to set any browser of our choice as our default browser now in iOS 14, or is it just
That's
these select?
No, that's correct. Basically, any browser that is updated to obviously the requirements for iOS 14, you will be able to select as your default. And also to the email client, you will now be able to select Gmail as your default email client if you don't want to use mail.app. That's one of the big changes that Apple introduced on iOS 14.
Fantastic.
That said, I will tell why to use Edge when you can use Chrome being the same, but that's now me thinking.
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense if you're in Microsoft 365 and you want all of the Microsoft guts available to you.
Okay.
I think that makes a lot of sense for Edge users. You're still using the Chromium engine, and you're going to be able to do all of the things you would want to do in that sense. But if you're logging in and you have to deal with, enterprise level login credentials, you don't want to have to deal with being locked out of different systems and whatnot. If you could just do that all inside of Edge, I think it may make sense there. Outside of that, you can imagine I'm
okay. You sell me an argument in which I did not imagine why could do that. But okay, that I can buy that argument.
And to close out our stories this week, I just brought to everyone's attention in about mid-September, NBCnews.com brought out this article about GPT-3, and I just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention only because you may be reading articles online that are productivity articles, but they're actually written by a machine learning algorithm. So just be mindful of this reality now, which is that GPT-3 is a type of machine learning technology, artificial intelligence technology that, in essence, can look at all of the as many websites as it can find on the internet and start to write natural language, and so it basically can write like we do as humans, and write fairly convincingly, and to the point that this particular researcher, he launched a blog, a productivity blog, and had GPT-3 just start pumping out blog posts, and no one was the wiser. It seemed like some of the people in the comments had some inklings that it might not be a human, but it was pumping out, fairly kind of benign productivity advice, the same stuff that we sometimes see being pilfered as productivity advice online anyway. And so it didn't seem like it was any different. And so it proved that, you had this thriving blog with a thriving engagement with people, all done by an algorithm. And so just be mindful of that as you're kind of moving along. Those who you follow hopefully are humans, and I mean, it comes down to really an issue of misinformation and disinformation on the internet, right? If we are not following real people and we're following entities that are putting out content, there's nothing wrong with that, but just make sure there's a human behind it, because you don't really know what advice or why it's giving that advice. And I think until it's good enough and it replaces us, I don't know. I think it's worth paying attention to real opinions and real experience from real humans. And I'm not anti-technology, as you can imagine, but I found it to be quite fascinating that this was possible. And we're there now. We're at that precipice where so much of technology is going to start rubbing up against the capabilities of humans. And what does that mean for us going forward is a wonderful existential thought experiment for you to spend in your own time, not for us here and now tonight. But that being the case, we are now at the end of our stories of the week, and that takes us to the changelog, our productivity app updates each week. Just for time purposes, I'm going to link out to our changelog so you guys can check it out. In essence, I keep track of dozens and dozens of applications, and many of them have brought to bear some really interesting and unique updates. I'll make a quick highlight of some of them that I think would be useful to you, and then you can look at the other change logs. I'll put these together for each episode so folks can keep up on top of it. But Airtable gets grid view in the Android app, which is really nice. So now you can see all of the fields of any particular row in Airtable in that grid view in the Android app now, and brings parity to the other systems. Asana unleashed a whole bunch of new functionality, including dashboards for projects, which brings charts and graphs to the system. They did updates to sections on timelines, so you now can add, rename, delete, and rearrange, as well as collapse sections in timeline view, which is kind of like the Gantt chart view within the system. You can create follow-up tasks from the iOS inbox, which was before limited. There's some improvements to boards. You can do some editing of goal progress metrics. All kinds of fun stuff that's happening on the Asana side. If you're a ClickUp user, you now have map view, location custom fields. You can export list and table views to Excel, which is kind of nice. Dropbox has Facebook data transfer. Basically, you can connect your Facebook account to Dropbox now and have photos and videos exfiltrated from your Facebook account to your Dropbox account as you post them, which is just really nice if you wanted a backup of those things. And they've brought a couple of other really interesting pieces to it. Facelthing has done a whole improved perspective section. So if you have used the Omnifocus perspectives concept, kind of similar in the GTD world. So good to see Facelthings doing a whole bunch of really fun new pieces, and they're going to start updating checklists and other parts in the mobile app to come, and we'll cover that when it does come out. Notion made a whole bunch of updates. I don't have time to go through all of them. Todoist for web published on October 7th, version 10.35, and with that they brought a whole bunch of new updates and a little bit of bug fixes, and so drag and drop tasks now more easily. So you can drag and drop tasks in the system. You can zip from a project's comments back to the main project view a little faster than that you can simply click the project's name and I guess you can click on a project's name to basically go from comments back to the main project. And then if you all didn't know, Toggle, the time tracking application, changed its name because now they have multiple applications. Toggle Track is the tool that formerly was known as just Toggle. So now Toggle Track, and with that they've changed the application icon. So now you'll see the red icon or gray icon depending upon your view has now changed to that pink icon, and now there's a new application icon, and so that's good. And Zapier, to close us out, has brought sharing. So with that, Zapier Sharing has the capability now for you to share Zaps both privately and publicly with folks, which is just phenomenal. So now you can, just like with IFT, you could share that IFT applet with other folks. You can now do that with Zapier, but in a private setting as well. Zapier is actually hosting a webinar. It is on the 29th of October. So there's a link in the video description and in the show notes for you to be able to register to watch it. I will be there. I'm very excited to learn about Zapier, Zap sharing. And so know that is available to us. And so with that is the productivity app updates. And this takes us swiftly along to our segment, The Science of Productivity. And so with that, we're all gonna go off screen, and Matt, you're up for the Science of Productivity. We'll see you after the break.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ray. So the Science of Productivity segment is a short segment that we do each week where I bring together some of the new research that has come out on how to accomplish your goals faster, how to become more productive. And this week, I want to talk about some research that talks about how our pace or our productivity fluctuates over the course of a project. And so research has long documented a U-shape in our productivity or pace in both athletic events and projects in the workplace, which that means basically we start off strong, we start off fast, and then as we go towards the middle of that, we hit a slump where we slow down. And then as we get towards the end, we come back up and we accelerate towards the end. And so this U-shape, has been documented in all kinds of sports, running from the 1 mile to the 10,000 meter, which is over 6 miles, rowing, cycling, etc. It also happens, in the workplace and in controlled studies where they do studies where they have them work on a task for a certain period of time. And one group, they don't tell them when they're getting towards the end, and the other group they do. And what they find is that the people who know that they're getting towards the end receive an uptick towards the end. And so how do we kind of level this off instead of having this, U shape? We can be more consistent across and maintain our productivity throughout the length of a project. Well, I want to mention two different effects that are related to this. The first is called the end spurt effect. And that is the second kind of uptick, the other side of the U shape that goes up. And what they found in the research there is that when people near 90% completion, they often experience an uptick in their performance, an uptick in the rate of productivity. So how do we get ourselves, and that happens for two reasons. One is motivational. We feel like we're getting towards the end. And the other is conservation of resources. We know that when we're getting towards the end, we can kind of accelerate because we don't have to hold back and conserve resources as much as we did when we were only 50%. So how can you create that same type of effect without being at 90% of the way through a project? Well, part of that is creating interim goals. So interim goals can allow you to feel like, okay, I'm approaching that goal even at the daily basis or the weekly basis. And as you get close to that goal, then you can experience that end spurt effect there. The other and second piece that I want to talk about is what Daniel Pink in his book When talks about as the midpoint slump. So how do we deal with this big drop in the middle? Well, a researcher, Connie Gersick, and also researchers Jonah Berger and Devin Pope, what they found is that there's something that they've called the uh-oh effect, which is that if we realize that we're a little bit behind in the middle of a project, we'll actually accelerate forward and make significant amount of progress quickly. And so Berger and Pope, what they found is that basketball teams that were 1 point behind at halftime, so in the middle of the game, actually had a better chance of winning than those who were 2 points ahead at halftime. And so being a little bit behind actually creates that motivation to wake us up and to say, okay, we need to move forward. And so how do you kind of create that uh-oh effect? Well, part of it's just having milestones along your project that you're keeping track of, and then communicating them to yourself or to your team to let them know, okay, we're a little bit behind. Because as you do that, that will create an acceleration and allow this U shape to flatten out more so that you can maintain and stay at higher levels of productivity. So that is the Science of Productivity segment for this week, talking about how we can level up our U-shaped performance and maintain that pace of productivity through the end spurt effect and the uh-oh effect. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. And so let's get into our featured story this week, and then we will do the new tools of the week before we close out. So we are in the home stretch of the show, and I'm really enjoying myself, and I hope you all who are watching are enjoying. Feel free to comment in the comment feed and let us know the good, the bad, the ugly. We're always happy to hear from you, and it's all good in that sense. So again, thank you, Matt, for the Science of Productivity segment. We're going to try and do different segments throughout the month from different experts on these topics, and I think the Science of Productivity is a great first anchor segment for the show. So let's talk about our story of the week. Did I say we're going to do story of the week first or new tools? I think story of the week. Okay, so story of the week is kind of near and dear to my heart because Google has they haven't just changed a name. I mean, they basically have brought to bear a new and improved interface to G Suite with what they're now calling Google Workspace. So for those of you who have been using Google's Office Productivity Suite, G Suite, across the many different areas, Google has now brought out Google Workspace. In essence, Google Workspace is a bundling together of all of the various workplace and kind of work improvement pieces of their puzzle into this new environment, and they're providing this in both a business context and then they'll be rolling that out to education and to enterprise and so on and so forth over time. And but it's just, I think it's going to be a really kind of interesting new chapter in the world of Google as we both improve the user experience so that you're able to utilize all of these various disparate parts of Google in more kind of seamless ways, right? Like there should be no reason why I can't start a Google Meet meeting from Gmail or from Google Calendar or from other tools and still get things done while I'm doing it. And that's really the goal of Workspace, is to be able to bring together all of these functions so that no matter where you are, you're able to get things done in other parts of Google that you might be utilizing. Gentlemen, what have you seen about Google Workspace so far? Questions, and I'm happy to answer those questions, and we can talk a little bit about what Google Workspace will look like. And just to start off with, know that Google Workspace includes all of the tools that you currently experience with regard to G Suite. It's just the level of integration will scale out a little bit more slowly for less used products. So Gmail, Calendar, Google Drive, Docs, Sheets, Slides, Meets, and Chat are all those first products within Google Workspace that are really going to get that high level of integration. And then over time, you're going to see more and greater improved interoperability between the other 50 plus products that are inside of what is currently known as G Suite.
I think it's something timely to do. As I think, it's something you have seen with Microsoft for many, many years. Google, even that it has all the tools, have them not necessarily integrated, not necessarily in a seamless way for everybody. I think bring them into a one uniform thing. It's going to really be a game changer. Again, this is not for technology people. The technology people has been using them, one way or the other. It is from the not necessarily technology people who are using these tools, the people who don't know that you can really do with Gmail and Gcalendar and Google Drive and everything else, have all those services, and they think they are silos instead of something that really can integrate to each other. And I think it's a fantastic next step to Google really solidify themselves into this enterprise market. People still believe that Microsoft is a lot more powerful and a lot more functional than most of the Google world. And I'm going to agree on certain specific things it is, but in most things it's not. In Google, it's really par or better. But because of that lack of integration that Microsoft has done really, really well for so long, for the not tech people, this is the impression that it is. It is similar to that discussion you have on the 80s about, well, if you have a Mac, you cannot play on a PC. That was true in 1994 or 84, but 94, that was not true. And for the longest time, people, even to this day, I hear people saying, well, but you have a Mac, we cannot share files. And you're like, what are you talking about? I think this is going to be really, really useful.
Any other questions or comments about Google Workspace? No? Good. All right. Let's close out this segment then, which is our featured story of the week, and move on to the new tools of the week. And so Augusto and I come across many personal productivity tools and services each week. And in new tools of the week, we each bring you a tool we think you might like. Of course, we always invite our guest panelists to share their tools as well. These don't have to be new tools necessarily in the sense that they're new to the world. They may just be new to you. And so they may be tools that have been around for a while. And so we're going to go ahead and go through our various tools this week. And since it's mental health awareness themed this week, I figured we'd all talk about various mental health awareness apps that we have or not. It doesn't have to be, but I happen to have picked one that was. And so the first tool of the week is the app Calm. And it has multiple competitors in the market, but I've just been using Calm for forever. And I don't use it for all of my meditation, but whenever I need some kind of guided meditation to just help me through a meditation. I've been meditating, it's been for the better part of 25 plus years. So I think I can calculate back 25 years. And the level of calm that I have experienced over time, thanks to meditation, has been profound. And Calm is just a great app to be able to get you in on the ground level. You can use the free version, you can upgrade to the premium version, and it's just a really great tool for being able to listen to it. There's a sleep side to it, and there are other functions there. I don't use those functions, but I really like the guided meditations for being able to just step in and just have something guide you through that process. And so that is my app this week. Augusto, do you want to talk about your app? You are muted.
I will talk about my app, but before I go into my app, I want to share something that changed my meditation practice. I've been trying to meditate consistently for so many years and fail miserably every time until I decide to use my Apple Watch to track it. And now I track it to the Apple Watch, and that has given me, for the first time, the consistency to really reap the benefits of the calming, of the meditation. So if you struggle with that and have an Apple Watch, try that. You can find mindfulness, whatever you want. There are many options you can pick, but it's really been a game changer for me. The app I want to try, it's not a new app. I've been using it for a really long time, and it's called Day One. It's a journal. I use it on all of my devices, and I have been journaling in this thing daily for a really long time. As my meditation practice took much longer, the journaling didn't. I don't know how long I've been journaling, but at least 10 or 15 years for sure. And Day One has been my application since it came out in the market. I've been upgrading, and it's really a game changer for me. I have multiple journals, so that way I can find or group things depending what I want to write and how I want to write, and it's been simply incredible.
Fantastic. And so with that, Dr. Buck, your app.
Yes, snipboard.io. I don't know how long this has been around, so I don't know if this is new. I do know it's new to me as of the last few weeks. And the way it works is just think about how many times in your life you've taken a little screen snip. Maybe you've copied your entire screen. Maybe it's just been a little portion of the screen. Maybe it's an error message that you're getting that you want to hang on to. Maybe it's a little photograph, something like that. But now you got to deal with this image and share that image with someone, upload the image. What Snip Board does is let you take that image and turn it into a URL. So the way it works is this: you just take your little snip, you go to snipboard.io, you paste, and it gives you the URL. Ray, you were sharing before a little graph, and I just took a little screen snip of it and pasted it into Snip Board. So I just put in the private comments what's the link to that. Are you able to grab that, and so that everybody can see what happens with that link that I just shared in the private chat, that Ray will now be able to, and he just copied and pasted that, and boom, there it is. So if you wanted to send that little graph to somebody else, you don't have to send the image. You can just throw it into snipboard.io, and it makes the link for you. And that works without even creating an account, without logging into anything. If you do create a free account, I think it saves your snips for up to 6 months or something like that. So once I found it, it's something that I find I'm using every single day.
Fantastic. And Matt, your tool is...
Yeah,
hold on one second. Go for it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about a tool, Joyable. In my former career, I was doing a lot of advising of organizations that were working in the diabetes prevention space. And it was the idea of taking that behavior change around healthy eating and physical activity and putting it in an app to make it digestible for people, attaching coaching to it. And so that was a company called Omada Health. And then after working with them for a little bit, we saw that there was a number of companies that were taking that same concept and applying it to the mental health space. Enjoyable is one of those that has these 5-minute activities that are based on cognitive behavioral therapy. You can see built with leading experts. And so it takes these activities that are designed to change how you're thinking if you're facing things like social anxiety or minor depression. It's not, for some of the more serious mental health conditions, but it can help in those kind of mild symptoms. And they've recently made it available so that individuals can do it as well. You can try it for 7 days, and then there's an annual plan that you can buy into that you can engage in these activities and change kind of the way you think about some of the things that might be causing some of the mental health challenges that you're struggling with.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everybody, for the new tools of the week. And that takes us to near the end of our show. We just have a couple of announcements, and then we're going to close out. So, Augusto, what are we doing on Wednesday?
So Wednesday at noon Eastern time, there is Tuesday, tomorrow actually, there is a new Apple event called High Speed. And on Wednesday, we are going to be doing a special event of Everything But Idle live like this, but it's going to be happening instead at 12 noon. And we are going to have Michael Zielinski from Nusby. We're trying to confirm our other guest. But we are going to discuss the event, what happened, what was, and try to geek out a little bit about the exciting news or not so exciting news that Apple may bring on Tuesday. So if you are listening to us or want to come to the event, the link will be in our page, and you will be able to find it and come to the live event if you want to see us geek out a little bit about Apple products.
Fantastic. And so that everyone is aware, each week we're theming things. So next week we're going to have a theme around cybersecurity, and so this is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. My company is one of the champions for the National Cybersecurity Alliance and CISA, which is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency for the federal government. And as a champion, we're basically ambassadors for the Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And so we're just doing all kinds of events throughout the month. And so we figured we'd bring this to Anything But Idle, and we'll talk a little bit about security next week on the show on Monday evening, or at least Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time for us. And so just know that that's up. And then you may actually see Augusto and I and our panelists in costumes for Halloween. One of these upcoming weeks. And so, it's going to put me a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but I'm excited to come to you as I may or may not be becoming a Spock. So we'll see how that goes. So those are some of our upcoming events and items there. And with that, anything else that I'm missing, Augusto, before we close out?
Yes, Anakin already confirmed for that event.
Well, the Star Trek universe is always going to win against your
There
Sith
is no way
nonsense.
that's going to happen.
I just made a few internet enemies. But anyway, I want to thank Dr. Frank Buck and Matt Plummer from Zervana for joining us here today as our first, but hopefully not our last guest panelists. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. Great to be here.
Fantastic. So with that, we're going to just close out. We've covered the productivity news this week. I want to thank Augusto Pinaud, of course, for joining me here always as my co-host. And so thank you, Augusto, for being here, of course, and helping put all of this together. With that, let us know if there's a story we missed. Of course, there's so many stories happening throughout the week. We can't keep track of everything. But if we did miss something and it's important, if you head over to anythingbutidle.com, you can go ahead and post a comment on the show, and we can, of course, therefore keep track of those things and update people in errata in future episodes. You can also tweet, and we do have the DMs open on our Twitter account at anythingbutidle. So you can go ahead and tweet at us there. If you have a question or comment about anything we discussed, feel free to leave a comment on the video. If you're listening to the podcast episode, head over to anythingbutidle.com, and then again, click on the episode and you'll find the comments section at the bottom of the page. There you'll find show notes. You'll find a transcript to be able to read and download, so that'll be there as well for you. If this is your first time watching the live stream, since this is the first live stream, that is probably the case, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. That way you're notified when we go live weekly. And if you're listening to the podcast show, please consider adding us to your favorite podcast app. If you click on the subscribe tab on anythingbutidle.com, you'll see instructions to follow us there and get episodes downloaded for free each week. If you've enjoyed spending time with or listening with us today, it'd be great if you can help us out by adding a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. If you're on YouTube again, you can hit the like button. And that really helps us to open up to a greater and broader personal productivity community. And we're looking forward to growing that as we go. We do run a personal productivity community called Personal Productivity Club. And so if you go to personalproductivity.club, you can go ahead and join us there. And we have an Anything But Idle group where you can post and engage in conversation around all of the various productivity news and technology news that we talk about and cover. And so with that, that brings us to the end of our first Anything But Idle live show. Take care, everybody. Here's to your productive life.